Certified Copy is a film that's written and directed by Iranian filmmaker Abbas Kiarostami. I found it to be an incredibly moving piece of filmmaking that felt both meticulous and mature within its craft. It's also a film that's even further elevated by its performances. One from William Shamel, who is actually an opera singer who only dabbles in acting, which is pretty impressive considering the kind of performance he gives in the film. And also from Juliette Binoche, which was a surprise to nobody. Her ability to express and embody even the tiniest details of emotional complexity in this film absolutely floored me. I was ecstatic to know that she won the Best Actress award at Cannes Film Festival because it's truly deserved. But one of the many aspects of Certified Copy that I truly admired was how it was able to explore its central themes revolving around the value of original pieces of art versus copies of art and the complexity and hypocrisy of human beings. All the while consistently exploring the influential impact our perception of the world has on our emotions and our way of thinking. It explores these themes in so many different ways throughout the film, whether it's through the philosophical debates our main characters engage in throughout the film, whether it's through pieces of reoccurring symbolism, whether it's through the interactions and experience they have with strangers, or whether it's through the narrative twist that occurs around halfway through the film. And it's arguably the most important exploration of its theme regarding the impact of perception, because it forces a reaction from the viewer and impacts them directly. So what we're going to do first is do a recap of the narrative and discuss some things as we go along. It starts off with Shamel's character James giving a lecture and presentation of his book titled Certified Copy. Juliette Binoche's character Elle walks in late to attend the presentation, but leaves early due to her son bugging her about being hungry. She gives her number to a friend to give to James in an attempt to meet up privately later. Sure enough, they meet up at Elle's antique shop, but he insists that they go out and get some fresh air. We then get a long scene with them in the car as they discuss a range of things that devolve into debates of whether or not there's a respect or beauty in ignorance, and whether or not the perception of something is more important than the truth behind it. And pretty much every debate, discussion, and theme presented in this film are all interrelated to each other in some way. They all kind of fall under the umbrella of perception. James uses an example from one of Andy Warhol's approaches to art.
Alright, Andy Warhol's Coca-Cola. So you take an ordinary object, you put it in a museum, and you change the way people look at it. It's not the object that matters, it's your perception of it.
At this point of the film, we've already learned a lot about these characters and their stances. James is obviously someone that we have come to learn believes at the very least that there is equal value in both an original and a copy. He uses the Andy Warhol example to obviously demonstrate the notion that it's the impact received by one's perception of an object that can be more valuable than the object itself. Elle, on the other hand, is someone we can tell believes that there is more value in an original artwork than a copy. She is someone who strongly believes that the hard truth is more important than what one wants to perceive and feel. This is certainly demonstrated a bit later when they have a discussion about her child and how careless he was for the sake of his own enjoyment. James sides with her child's line of thinking, but Elle stresses that it's not reality and that it's something that just sounds nice in books. She stresses that someone has to pay for the consequences for one's carelessness and irresponsible perceptions. This is something that again expresses her belief in the higher value and importance of objectivity versus subjectivity, which I would like to point out real quick is ironic for her character to believe something like that, considering she wears a cross around her neck the entire film. But I think it's Kiarostami trying to point out the hypocritical nature of these characters and human beings in general. Even people with sincere convictions either hold beliefs or act in ways that seem to contradict their convictions. People are more complex than what they present in the forefront as their identity. This was demonstrated earlier in the car scene where Elle got angry at a pedestrian walking in the street and stated,
"It's amazing. People think that road is their home."
But a moment later, she's literally reading while driving and demonstrating that she too also treats the road as her own home. And I think this notion of hypocrisy is also further fleshed out throughout the film, and especially by its conclusion. But we'll get there when we get there. Anyway, they eventually make their way to the artifact that Elle wanted to show James. The artifact turns out to be a painting that for hundreds of years impacted people who thought it to be an original, when all along it was a copy. She wanted to show him this work of art as an intellectual jab to his ego because of how the entire thesis and message of his book has already been done and put in a museum. She wanted to see how he would react to the fact that his book is also just a copy which has nothing original about it. James basically acts unimpressed and goes down the impossibility of originality rabbit hole.
The original is only a reproduction of the beauty of the girl in the picture. She's the real original. And I suppose if you look at it like that, then even the Mona Lisa is a reproduction of La Gioconda. And that smile. Do you think that's original, or do you think that Leonardo just asked her to smile like that?
Next, they get some coffee together, and this is where the film takes an odd turn and essentially subverts every viewer's preconceptions. This is the point of the film that I can see turning plenty of people off, or just simply leaving them scratching their heads for the remainder of the film. Elle asks James to expand on the mother and son that he witnessed some years ago that inspired him to write the subject of his book. It gets revealed that the mother and son he describes he saw outside his hotel window turns out to be Elle and her son 5 years ago. Things get a bit awkward and emotional, and as soon as James tries to finish his story, he gets interrupted by a phone call and takes it outside. An older Italian lady begins to chat with Elle, and she mistakes them as husband and wife. Elle decides not to correct her and begins to complain about James as a husband, and a debate ensues between them about gender roles in a marriage and what should be expected of each partner. When James enters back into the cafe, Elle tells James that the lady mistook them for husband and wife and didn't correct her. Then he replies to Elle with,
Obviously we make a good couple. What do you think?
And for the rest of the film, they argue and discuss the same type of subjects and bring up detailed things from their past as if they've been married for 15 years. The arguments get much more heated and emotional due to the context of the relationship changing to a much more personal level. They bring up personal things in regards to each other's past that include how James is never there and chooses his career over his family, how Elle fell asleep behind the wheel of a car while her child was in the backseat, and amongst many other things. But the film concludes in a hotel that Elle claims spent one of their anniversaries together, and even goes to the exact room she claims they stayed in. But before we move on further, the big question on everybody's mind is what the hell is really going on here? Are they actually a married couple that just decided not to reveal it until their cafe date, or are they just role-playing the entire thing? If you want my interpretation, I believe they are just role-playing as a married couple. There was essentially no indication before the cafe scene that they had any past relationship. When Elle's child teases her about liking James, it's never once implied that he or her has any past with him. And whenever family members get brought up, whether it's Elle's sister or her child, James acts completely new to the information and doesn't act how someone who already knew these people already would act. In the cafe scene, when James says, "Well, we do make a good couple," that's basically him telling Elle that he is aware of the game she's playing and is willing to continue it for the remainder of the day. But why? Why would they do this and go so far with it as to call each other out on made-up things of their past? What's the purpose? I'll do my best to explain the way I interpreted their characters and its artistic purpose. First off, I believe Kiarostami wanted to conduct an experiment of his own on the audience. He wanted to see how people would react to being directly impacted by a couple whose originality is ambiguous, because it's a presentation of the film's central theme and debate in regards to the value of a copy versus an original. Does them acting as a couple take away from the emotional impact that not only you felt watching them argue and interact, but the characters' feelings as well? The anger and the sensuality that they feel for each other during the roleplay, is that all without value and meaning? Is it all just fake? Well, for me, the answer is obviously no. I believe a lot of the concerns and issues that get brought up are projections and assumptions of and from each other. Role-playing as husband and wife put them in a position where they felt more comfortable expressing their most honest inner feelings about not only how they feel about each other and their ideas, but also about their past life insecurities and regrets. When Elle projects the role of the absent workaholic husband onto James, she is not only assuming something about James, but she is projecting something she experienced with her ex-husband. And James naturally gets defensive when these accusations come flying at him, because he too has had a past with an ex-wife that accused him of the very same thing. When they bring up oddly specific details about each other's past, again, it's both an assumption of their character and also something they've actually dealt with in the past. But another important question is, why would James agree to play along with Elle's little game? While I think James genuinely likes her quite a bit, and also has respect for her intellect and her ability to understand and articulate the concepts he wrote about in his book, I also think that given the fact of our recent revelation that he was inspired by her and her son to write this book, he felt like he also owed it to her. But I think he went into this game not realizing how deep it would actually get. He didn't think he would hit the emotional peaks in the way that he did, and ultimately expose a little bit of who he truly is. Same thing applies to Elle, because the final scene of the film is not only filled with some of the most stunning shots I've ever seen, but it reveals how much of an impact the roleplay has had on their relationship and their beliefs. At this point, both James and Elle have had such a profound experience that they both seem to contradict their initial philosophy regarding originals and copies that they held so dearly. Elle basically reaches out to James by asking him to stay the night with her in the hotel, proving that she has found incredible value in their roleplay, or I should say their copy. James refuses Elle's request and reinforces the notion that he has to be back at 9. This proves that he is not sticking to his guns about everything he wrote about in his book that argues and expresses the value that people have with their experiences with copies. He experienced something special and profound today with Elle by recreating a copy, but is refusing to acknowledge it and chooses to continue to go on with his normal life, which is a hypocritical thing for his character to do. Same goes for Elle. It demonstrates that no matter how fixed we think we are on a belief system or philosophy, a profound experience can alter or even evolve your previous perceptions, regardless if it's a copy or an original, fake or real, subjective or objective. The final scene in the film has the camera positioned as a mirror, which by the way, mirrors are a huge recurring piece of symbolism throughout the film. This is because a mirror reflection is a metaphorical representation of a copy. All mirrors do is project the image of the original, but are nevertheless incredibly important in our daily lives. But getting back to the final scene, James looks straight into the camera, or the mirror, as if he's doing some serious contemplating in regards to his beliefs and identity, and also further deciding whether or not he should stay with Elle at the hotel. The church bell tolls as James leaves and leaves us with this beautiful mirror image shot of the church beyond the window frame. Again, it's a mirror shot, so it's just a reflection or copy of reality, but it doesn't devalue its beauty. The ending of the film, in terms of whether or not James decided to stay with Elle, is left ambiguous, which to me makes the film haunting yet beautiful at the same time. But you could also argue that their relationship and role-playing experiment is also an expression of the impossibility of originality. Because even though they were role-playing, the emotions, ideas, and events brought up were entirely real. It's as though an experiment of a fake relationship created something real. But I'll end the video on one last quick point. I love that Kiarostami never really takes one side of the philosophical argument here. Through its writing and directing, it explores the value of both originals and copies in different ways. In one scene, we are shown a man that at first appears to be severely scolding his wife, but when they turn to the side and continue to walk, it's revealed that he was just talking on the phone to someone else. To me, this is Kiarostami expressing that there is an intrinsic value and importance in objective reality. If we were to claim that perception is what always matters most, it would be completely unfair to this old man for people to perceive that he was scolding his wife in a verbally abusive way. It demonstrates that sometimes there is a correct and incorrect way to perceive something, which again is adding weight to the argument that values originals. But then we had a scene before this where multiple people are trying to convince James to take a picture for them. Juliette Binoche represents the original because she is the first one to ask, but James refuses. The groom tries to convince him, but still no luck. It isn't until the bride comes along that James finally decides to do it. This demonstrates the value in a copy and your perception of it. Everybody essentially said the same thing to him, but it isn't until the third time does it succeed. And that's because of the presentation and the context of the message that derived from the original. This is something that adds weight to the argument that values copies and the perception of them. But either way, I love this film dearly for how incredibly well thought out and layered everything is. It's a minimalist approach to filmmaking that is able to yield something that I found incredibly thought-provoking, complex, and profound. Well, that ends my interpretive analysis for Certified Copy. I really hope that you found this video insightful. If you really enjoyed it, please give it that thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.